Welcome, Liz. It's an honor to have you here today.
Thank you for having me.
Mm-hmm. I'm Hannah Jewell. This is Building for Peace with Hannah Jewell, a podcast looking at healthcare and food sovereignty as we move through times of transition. I have with me today Liz Lilley. She has a background in cooperative housing. She is a psychotherapist and a breathwork facilitator, and she's working on the trials with psilocybin for mental health at King's College, London. We are so lucky to have her weaving of expertise here with us today, and I'm so excited to hear what you have to share and some of your stories, Liz.
Thank you.
Let's start with a little bit of your background. How did you come into the field of healing, and what drew you to this path, which has then deepened over time?
I started in my very early 20s. I went on a travelling adventure through India, and that was where I received my first healing therapies through body work and massage work, and this really shifted something for me, that whole experience of experiencing different cultures, different smells, sounds, sights, and I came back feeling like I needed to embrace a healing modality or share this experience that I'd had with other people. So I studied to be a massage therapist and reflexology as well, and aromatherapy. And from there started a small business in Brighton, which we had for a group of women, had as a cooperative for 11 years. From the North Lanes, and I learnt so much through that experience, so much about working together in a community, and so much from all the clients that I worked with. And from there I kind of realised that I was holding space for a lot of emotional needs, and I hadn't really been taught about this with my massage therapy training. And as I was releasing with that person, releasing trauma from the body, I was holding people's emotional process, and I felt underexperienced and underqualified to do that. So I went on to become a psychotherapist, and these things have remained quite separate in my practice for quite a long time, mainly due to the restrictions of regulatory bodies not recognising kind of psychotherapy with touch. So I kind of felt that there was a piece of the puzzle that was missing. So yeah, I was working in these two different professions sort of separately, so as a massage therapist and as a psychotherapist, and could really see the benefits of both, and really wanted to draw the body-mind connection together in my work. And the missing piece of the puzzle there for me was breath work. And after I had my child, I had several breathwork experiences which really helped me to access and clear some of the trauma from birth and those early years of being very sleep deprived. So I had some really profound experiences with breathwork and brought that into my practice as well. And that's really been a place where I've developed the work that I'm doing now. So working with breathwork can be very much working with expanded states of consciousness, in similarity to working with plant medicines or psychedelic substances, whichever you may want to name them, and this has given me more experience and more understanding of people's process, and the empowerment through talking therapy, realising that at some stages people would get stuck with talking therapy. It was like we'd reached the end of where we were able to go, and something more was needed. So yeah, breath work was a piece of the puzzle. So now I can combine these two things together to support people to release trauma from the body somatically, to open up to different states of consciousness, to experience mystical experiences or experiences of oneness in that way. And very similarly to a psychedelic or plant medicine experience is what I've witnessed in the work that I've done in this way. And breathwork is also used as a preparation tool and as a training tool for therapists on clinical trials. And I facilitated the training for therapists on clinical research using breathwork as a tool, because legally therapists aren't allowed to take some of the substances that they will be working with their participants.
So there's a whole lot in there. Yeah, just taking it back, and we can kind of unpack this as we go. Psychotherapy is wonderful, and it does have its limit, because the mind is only one part of the self.
Yeah.
And I've experienced this starting with counseling in my teens, and then saying, wait a minute, the body needs to be involved.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then going into energy work and learning how to work somatically is a major step. And then after that, you get the body and mind integrated. The heart has got to come in. And for me, the psychedelic experiences of breath or plant medicines are all rooted in the heart. And for me, I think that's a different approach than seeing them as an expansion of consciousness. But coming down through the heart yields a really pure experience. How people are going to serve and help their clients without having experienced these things themselves is a big question.
Yeah, and it's one that I think is being discussed a lot. You know, it's not that all therapists, it's not that people haven't had experiences with these medicines, because obviously we can travel to other countries and legally engage in ceremonies or events where psychedelics are used. So it's not, but as part of the trials in the UK, they can't offer the therapists the substances because they're not legal here.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And one of the incredible benefits of having something like psilocybin, like the trials you're working with, coming through a body of research and then into use with the general population, is that it may be accessible then to people who wouldn't find it otherwise, who are really dealing with serious mental health issues, and maybe a great support. I've heard incredible stories, and we all have. Have you seen any beautiful unfoldings in your work so far?
Yes, and it's very early stages as well. You know, when it comes to clinical research, if we look at the kind of figures that we're dealing with on a worldwide perspective and kind of zoom out, there's over 100 million people that are suffering from something that's labelled treatment-resistant depression, and that means they've tried at least 2 of the current therapies that are available to them, and it might be talking therapy and antidepressants or a combination of different drugs that they've tried. And there's this kind of drive that I feel with this work. That's an immense number of human beings that are really suffering with their mental health, and like you say, there's this working in the clinical research is stepping stones so that people have more choice with what they can access and what they can access and feel safe to access and legally access, because that's very important for a lot of people to have that container and safety.
Yeah, especially when we're looking at how antidepressants are regularly prescribed to children as young as 14. They're getting these drugs into their system. Maybe they haven't had a chance to do psychotherapy or nature connection. And then an alternative that's not so harsh on their bodies and their minds could be really useful. But if we're dealing with young people, elderly, etc., then having access through this path of the research is really important, actually, in this context, in this culture, in Europe and the West.
Yeah,
exactly.
Very much so, yeah.
Yeah, in indigenous cultures, there's not such a need for working with depression in teens and adults because there is a sense of community that is so vital.
Yeah.
And that sense of community is working with the spirit of the child all along throughout their development and their life. And so perhaps a deeper resolution is also to look at our methods of education, our expectations on what a person can do in life and become.
Yeah, and I think, that's one of the things that I feel like we have these huge numbers of people that are diagnosed with mental health conditions, and the lack of community, I really do feel is a huge part of that, us not feeling supported by each other.
So let's talk about the importance of the community aspect. I know that you developed this cooperative housing project, which is beautiful, and your sense of community and your understanding of how that works and how it builds such resilience in our lives is something powerful to behold. Tell us about the cooperative housing and what community means to you as a lived reality.
Yeah. There's so many different paths I could come into that question. The reason why we set up the housing cooperative, and that was 9 years ago now in Brighton, was we began to the rise in house prices began to really price us out of living in the town that we'd lived in for a really long time. And there was also this ethos about wanting to have a work-life balance. In order to live in the town, do we really need to be working sort of 60-hour weeks to be able to pay for the rent for the properties that we live in? And it came out it started as a kind of stand against that, really, because when you can create a housing cooperative, then it's there forever, and it's not just for me, and it's not just for the founders who started that. It's an ongoing process. Any money that's generated from that property goes back into funding more housing cooperatives. So the community grows with each cooperative that's set up, and this means that it's sustainable and it's affordable and it's there as social housing for people that need it. The way that we set that up was to live in as a group of 6 people, and that evolved and changed and shifted and grew as we lived in that space together as well. And there's so much learning to be done from living in community and growing with different adults, and really noticing how when someone leaves and a new person steps in, and the energy changes, and you've new lessons to learn about yourself and how you can be flexible and how we can be supportive of each other's needs, because everyone's needs and backgrounds are different, of course. So it's been such a rich journey, being able to learn those skills for myself and for who I am in the world, to be able to move and flex and kind of bend in the wind and get through the storms and see and flourish. Actually, that environment for me was extremely holding. It allowed me to have the freedom to develop the work that I wanted to develop. It allowed me to bring my child into the world without feeling isolated or destitute, possibly. It really supported my growth on so many levels, having people that I consider my family, to live with and to be with and to exist with.
As a psychotherapist who helps people with the integration process, how do you see the role of community and integration weaving together as we move forward?
I think it's essential. These are not standalone experiences that someone has and can process themselves. when people have very big mystical experiences, and or very body-centered experiences or very heart-centered experiences, these can feel very alien for a lot of people, and the sense of feeling very alone with that experience doesn't support the growth to come out of it. Therefore, working with psychedelic integration and building that sense of community around people is really important. And I was speaking to someone the other day, and they'd had an experience about a year ago, an ayahuasca ceremony, and they really felt an immense amount of grief because they felt like they'd lost the gifts that they'd been given in that experience and didn't know how to connect back with that experience. So it's making people aware that there's other people in that situation, there's other people that haven't brought the gifts back into their lives and haven't been able to take a next step because they don't know how. And those experiences can feel so different from their day-to-day life that there really isn't a process of kind of being able to allow the heart to be open, to allow those gifts to shine through. So there's grassroots groups, there's integration circles, there's psychotherapists through the Institute of Psychedelic Therapy. There's many different ways that are building alongside as an underground culture as well, and a spiritual community as well. There's different ways then for people to access a sense of community and be held by each other and resonate with each other and realise they're not the only one, and it's so valuable and so important.
Yeah, this again gives me a vision of circles of people talking to each other, people talking to each other on the phone, in chats, when they meet on the street, when they're walking on the beach, and our collective understanding of what health is and what spirit is growing. In my perspective, we're like babies right now. Our eyes are just opening, and to have such a direct connection with Great Spirit, God, universal love, whichever name you want to choose, to have that connection through the experience of psychedelics, plant medicines, or the body and somatic work. How do we then fully embody it? And unfortunately, there's a lot of recreational use, there's a lot of people offering ceremonies and experiences without the understanding of the full indigenous way community is utilized, or of the way that the body can be utilized. And these are not one-off experiences. That's not how they are held traditionally. They're held within the family, within the tribe. And we're so used to buying experience as a culture. So to shift the understanding from an experience that's bought and had, like a rave or a weekend party, to something that actually is connecting us to the spirit within us. This is a beautiful opening. Maybe it will take us a few decades, but we are at least heading in the right direction.
Yeah, and I think we're going to see such a there's a sense of there's a lot of desperation out there for people in their mental health. The options that they have available to them are really not working for them. So the fact that there may be a lot of recreational use or people trying substances without any kind of preparation or understanding what they might be entering into. We see a rise in this because people are searching, there's some level of hope there that something is going to support them on their journey to well-being, and that's not a journey to happiness or necessarily, but there's something about resilience and well-being and not feeling really stuck or depressed or anxious or isolated, and all these things that community is a great resolution for. So we're looking at people experimenting with things that maybe they don't understand, or maybe they're not held, and And there's lots of integration clients that me and my colleagues receive that have been in very unsafe settings, that haven't felt held, that have been in kind of mass ceremony that has felt very unstable or very unsafe for them, where they haven't consented to maybe certain practices that then they feel violated in some way. So there's a kind of there's a growth in so many different ways. You know, there's a growth of these shadow sides, these unheld spaces. There's a growth in clinical research. There's a growth in authentic ceremony from where we're really drawing upon indigenous practices and cultures and how we're using these medicines in our society, which doesn't have the same holding. This doesn't have the same container. So there's so many different angles that we can that are growing all at the same time, and some of those are going to be harmful and some of those are going to be growthful.
Exactly. Everything grows together, and as we see with clear eyes, it's that contrast which allows us to choose. And one thing that's so important to me is the understanding of unity, that we all move into a more loving space as humanity, a more fair, more just, more sensitive space, filled with reciprocity and care together. Some of us don't go there and leave the rest behind. So if we're going to move as a unity, as a big wave of humanity here, then we necessarily need to see contrast so that we can make choices. And when we really choose respect and care and love and deep embodiment, all of us, well, that will be a new dawn.
Yeah, exactly. And this sense of different ways to access their support. And what came to me as you were talking was around, you know, this lack of connection to nature and lack of connection to the planet, and that's something that gets sort of seen a lot within the clinical research is that despite them they're not in a nature setting, and despite that there's this deep sense of connection to the earth and to our environment, and that's something that we've become really detached from as human beings and in a general sense. And the fact that these experiences that can reconnect people to their environment, to the world we live in, to the earth that's holding us. This is an incredibly powerful thing, you know. Well, the impact and the ripple effect that could have out is, I'm very hopeful for that as being one of the experiences that people regularly have.
I see this in my work all the time, that people look at nature, they walk through nature, they drive by nature, and they say, oh, it's beautiful. But to actually connect, to actually be present with a tree, be present with a mountain, be present with a body of water, a river, or the sea, is so much different. And once that understanding is opened, you can't really pedal backwards from it. And then all of our efforts towards sustainability shift radically, because they're coming from a place of ilim, knowledge, lived experience, different than ifram, knowledge, studious experience. So that ilim, that inner knowledge, and those are Sufi terms, we've been living without it for a long time. And part of the grief that I see in my own clients is when that connection is restored, the grief for having not had it for so many years.
The pain and challenge of reconnecting, you know, that's certainly something that I experience with some of the people that I work with. You know, how difficult is it to feel love and connection with each other, when it feels like such an unfamiliar thing, and with the earth and with the sky and the trees and everything else that comes with this beautiful planet that we live on. And when we are reconnected to that can be a deeply painful experience. To feel love can feel painful in some ways.
Yes, and this is talked about a lot in the Sufi path too, the cracking of the heart. And when something cracks, it doesn't necessarily feel pleasant. It opens, and maybe it's sore from rust and disuse. But if the heart doesn't crack, then the first step hasn't been taken. So I'm personally a huge proponent of daily practice for the integration process. Whether the person is going first through psychotherapy and then through the body and then into more expanded states, as my own journey has been, or whether they enter things in a different order. In any case, the daily practice holds the integration. And so somatic-based, body-based practices, prayer for many people, really can provide that daily grounding. Is breath work an incredible integrative practice, as well as one that can lead you into the journey?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm a big advocate for that. Connecting with the breath is connecting to our own life force, is allowing us to be present. And I certainly suggest to everyone that I work with, I don't start a session generally without breathing together, to arrive in the space, to become present in the space that we share, to listen to our bodies, to hear what they have to say, to notice what's going on with the mind, with the body, and just honour that, land in a space together so that we can then move from there. And daily practice, and it can be very unfamiliar for people to sit with the breath and to sit with their body, and see what arises from that place, from the gift that comes up, the knowledge and the wisdom that comes up from our own systems, from our own bodies, allowing the mind to take a bit of a break. And depending on what kind of breath work we're using, I think that the sort of conscious connected breath, which is a more activating type of breath work that you do in a facilitated space, that can be a great tool for opening. It can be a great tool for reconnecting, because it really does allow the mind to take a bit of a holiday. So if we've come out of, or we're moving towards a psychedelic experience, or we're travelling to a ceremony, or whatever that might be, to begin to use the breath to open the body, to begin to hear what the messages are that are coming in, that we're receiving, so that then we can open to maybe deeper gifts, maybe deeper experiences, maybe shed some of the layers of protection or boundaries that we have in place for us, having a full human experience with whatever gifts that are there to be received. And again, with preparation, with integration of that experience, to sit in a very kind of yin way with the breath, and being really slow and gentle and mindful. It's so important. It's something that I'd suggest to everyone, as well as movement, as well as walking in nature, as well as yoga practice, or whatever it is that person might resonate with or already use. But to do that mindfully and consciously, I totally agree, is a really important, to keep this flow between mind and body, to keep the heart open, to keep these practices and these experiences alive, and not just in the mind. In the indigenous path that I walk, we say the psycho-spiritual body, so that it's not just the mind and body, but that the spirit is always flowing through, and that the body and the mind connected allow that heart, which is called the throne of God or the throne of love, allow that heart to be fully present. Just really bringing the heart back into it as well. I'd love to see the conversation around
places like clinical trials and places like integration circles really bring the heart more focused. We'll get there, I think.
Yeah.
I think we will, because it's the basis of human experience, isn't it? So eventually that heart's going to be beating so much, asking so much to be felt that we can't ignore it anymore. I feel that is one of the causes of depression and mental health from the outset, is a shutting down of the heart, whether that happened at an early age or later on. So bringing the heart through. How do you feel about the heart?
My own experience of connecting with my heart was a painful one. That was a painful opening, but also so beautiful and so deeply rich and nourishing that. But to live with an open heart is like constant maintenance. So it's constant assessment, it's constant listening, it's constant reminding of myself why I'm here and what I'm doing, and checking in to see that actually, is my work resonating with me, is my life resonating with me, is my environment resonating with me, what do I need to move, what do I need to change. So it's my greatest teacher, and it's one that needs constant attention. And so I'm really aware that when I move away from listening to my heart, or make a decision which actually doesn't serve me or doesn't serve my heart, then I notice a shift in my behaviour, in how I am in the world, and other people around me will notice that too. And it's not about berating myself when that happens, it's about learning how to hear that, and learning how to hear it sooner. Oh, there's something that's out of balance with me, how can I reconnect to it? So yeah, it's been an extremely long and beautiful process to really refine that connection, and I think we find that with mental health all the time. It's about self-compassion, it's about understanding that from early childhood there might be attachment wounds that need tending to. That doesn't necessarily mean kind of reliving experiences, but it's about kind of reconnecting, about understanding, and the mind needs a part in that as well, which is obviously where I think psychotherapy is really helpful. The greater understanding of why we may live or behave in certain ways is then we can begin to change that through that understanding, through the mind having a clear story. This may have happened at this stage in my life which caused this wounding, and now maybe I'm responding to that and responding to that and responding to that, or reacting. And actually, how can I choose to respond differently? There's an empowerment there through self-awareness and compassion, self-compassion at the same time, and psychotherapy really holding that loving space. The relationship is what's key in psychotherapy. The modality, or what I've studied in the past is a very small part of that experience. It's about how we connect as human beings, and that is through love and through heart-centered connection. Because a lot of people haven't experienced that, and that can be challenging and difficult, and that's where being honest and open and communicating my internal world, so that we can be open and really understand each other on that heart level, and share our wounds and share our successes, and really be human beings together, even if it's only for 1 hour a week. That can be transformational.
It really can. The acknowledgement of the story that we have lived, that those around us are living, is a huge piece. Is a huge piece. And the mind is part of the picture. It's a great servant to the heart. Really, we have a mind for a reason, so it's not to live one without the other. Actually, it's to bring these things together. And Rumi says that the path is the flying and the falling away. It's that contrast. Yeah. As our wings figure out how to be used, we might still fall away sometimes.
Yeah.
So one of the things I'm really interested in is in the context of our Western and European culture and our allopathic healthcare system. This deep work of the heart that is happening in psychotherapy, in somatic practices, in plant medicine experiences. This deep work of the heart has its own opening that is perhaps less affected by the need for profit that Big Pharma might push on it, who is funding trials for plant medicine to move into the general population. It might have a more deep and lasting imprint on our collective consciousness that moves underneath and beyond those other agendas. Because what we see right now with the prescribing of antidepressants is a self-generating mechanism for profit. And so if we're looking to be truly heart-centered as practitioners, yet to work inside the system, which is the culture that we live in, where might we find and nurture as practitioners that deeper imprint as we walk in both worlds, so to speak?
Yeah, and there isn't anyone that I've met through the clinical research, and I'm a therapist, and there's a much broader team as well that are working with each individual. So I think from that therapist perspective, there's so much personal work that gets done. I don't know anyone that hasn't been on their own deep personal exploration, their inner work through whatever means they may have done that. But therapist training is not for everybody. There's a lot of deep personal process that goes for that. We have to attend a lot of therapy as well. The people that are working in these environments are really experienced. They're very self-reflective. They can also hold that self-compassion, but they can also take responsibility for where their limitations are, or for maybe as we're exploring this field, which may be new for us as therapists, we have a lot of support, we have a lot of supervision, we have a sense of community between us as a group of therapists, and we're really building on that. And through my training through the Institute of Psychedelic Therapy, so it's a 2-year training called Depth Relational Process, and that is very much it. There's 20 people gathered together, and we're doing deep relational work. We're working with our own processes, we're supporting each other, we're working in a collective realm as well, and we're really going to the places that we would expect our clients may do in the future. And there's something, the building of the community that's around that we're finding there's such a strength in that, and there's so many new ideas being born out of that space, and there's so many new there's so many new community groups starting, or integration circles, and these are really empowering spaces for people to continue to access their experiences, to share, to hear. Like you're saying, there's always a candle in the middle, there's always the fire there. We're sat around the fire to share and gather our experiences. We're rebuilding what was there in the modern age.
And this, I believe, is the hope of the future. You've said it so well, and it's so encouraging to me to know that there's this depth of relational process happening within the overarching system as it is. Our ways that we connect to and hold each other as healers and therapists have got to deepen. And our willingness to work with each other across modalities, across systems, for clients to be able to work with more than one person to be held by a team. I feel this is really the only way we can resolve the complexity of what we're dealing with as a human race and population right now.
And I think that kind of that one-to-one work or two-to-one work, or whatever it is that comes out of those therapeutic processes, is really is really about that relationship. You know, it's the relationship between there may be structures and pharmaceutical companies and profit around, but when it comes down to it, the therapists are there with the individual, and the individual is getting complete presence, complete care, and is being heard in all of their experience from past, present, and their hopes for the future too. And that relational aspect is not lost. You know, I'm sure there'll be ways that organisations are trying to remove, like therapy, the therapeutic aspect of it, the therapy holding. But I see many organisations really building on the therapeutic aspect, you know, the therapy, the human connection that comes alongside the substance or the drug in these cases where plant medicines have been synthesised.
Yeah, and this is a huge improvement over the current system where a person sees their GP for 10 minutes. They get referred to a specialist that they see months later, that they see for 20 minutes, and there's no relationship built. And people are really falling through the cracks in the current way. So any method that's holding that relational integration as a foreground and the relational processing as a foreground and the care and the connection is going to be a huge step forward for us. And you're right, there will be organizations that try to do away with that part. There will be places that open up on the high street for quick, like we've seen with cannabis in the places when these dispensaries now, you get your prescription card and anyone can go in there and there's not the relational process involved. So that is something to look out for and to be aware of. But as much as that might exist, there is also this care, these networks. I'm really happy to hear about the depth of them.
Yeah, and it's something that even through all my therapist training, you know, the depth of the work that we're doing in these spaces, knowing and understanding the humility and the presence that we need to have if we're going to facilitate these spaces for other people in the future. It's
so essential.
Yeah, we really, you know, we really understand that. There's not a person there that isn't really willing to do the work so that they are able to be fully present with another person whilst they're doing their work.
So I was talking with my Sufi teacher the other day, and we were talking about true spiritual paths and about shamanism, and how shamanism actually is the root of many true spiritual paths, including Sufism. It's older than religion. And shamanism moves with the people on the planet across great geological landscapes and timescapes. And because of that, it is always being reformed. It is always updating according to the data that we have, which is our collective experience. And so I'm looking at some of our previous ways of engaging with these substances, with plant medicines, with psychedelics, with our practices like breath work and whirling and mantra. I'm looking at our previous ways of working with these and what is being born now for the coming generations. So just to bring some of those through, in Eastern Europe there was a time when two people would have a conflict, or when one person was ill in the heart the community would gather on the sides of a riverbank, and they would stand on either side, and they would sing across the river to each other until the song grew and grew and grew, until they had to step into the water, and grew and grew and grew, and the song grew and grew and grew, until eventually they met at the center of the river and embraced. And in this way they washed through what was ailing them, the person who needed the healing and the community. And I have a dear friend who is Jewish and was telling me about some of the songs they sing that have no words. And it's a very similar concept where we gather as a group and one person starts and the singing goes with no words at all, and it rises and someone else picks it up and someone else picks it up until the whole room is washed of what's been there waiting in their heart for release. And in the North American traditions, similar. The person who is needing healing stands in the middle of the circle with their close connected family or friends, and the community gathers around and they pass the peace pipe for pure communication, and everything that is spoken to is listened, and it's passed as long as it is needed until the feeling of resolution arises. So these are some of the ways we have worked shamanically and with our practices of embodiment and breath in previous times. What's being born now is like intellectually sophisticated. We're in a more sophisticated time with different technological forces bearing on us, with vast realms of consciousness each person carries, meeting the next and the next. So in terms of the landscape of our practices and our fields, looking at that big picture across time and what we are seeding now for the coming generations, for their positive mental health, for their positive sense of community, for their spiritual connection. How do you see that terrain from that big picture of past moving forward and where you are at within the middle of that right now?
Yeah, I see a lot of those kind of old practices coming back. You know, there's this sense of kind of meditation, of sitting in nature, of sitting in the circle together and sharing, of having collective healing experiences. There's I think the communication is growing as well. You know, people are suddenly able to talk about their psychedelic experiences in a different way because there's media coverage about it, which has made it mainstream, and now people can begin to talk about these experiences that they may have had, you know, way back in their life, or whether that was, you know, yesterday, and yet there's this sense of community and understanding that's growing. In terms of, I love the idea of singing together, and I love singing, and I realise that this is such a beautiful part of healing. And I think in my breathwork workshops, I always try and just encourage the voice out, you know, to allow song, to allow sound, because we've become so quiet. We've become so quiet about expressing ourselves. And obviously song and shared song is such a beautiful way to do that, and is such an incredibly opening experience that on a scientific level we know has an amazing effect on our bodies and our mental health as well. There's plenty of research been done into that as well, so we're kind of feeding these different aspects of ourselves. And even, you know, even in the clinical research settings, there's meditations, there's breathing practices. These are things that people can continue to bring into their lives, and these might not be things that people have ever accessed before. It's not like a breathing practice or a meditation is normal to them. That is not something that may have ever come up in their lives. So you're really encouraging the imagination, encouraging the connection to the breath, and how we can soothe ourselves with the breath, how we can really begin to manage our overwhelming feelings, how we can bring ourselves back from a place of anxiety, you know, to really empower people with things that they just have available to them all the time. And there's the simplicity of those things, and the simplicity of the relationship and the presence that's offered. That all of these things, they're gifts we all have access to. So I think they just begin. They may be sort of a drop of water into the pond, but it ripples out, and I think these things become people's daily practices as well, because they have a lived experience, they have a somatic experience, they have a mental, a full body and spirit and mind experience of how these things can really support us, and it's often the simplicity that's the most powerful thing, and the accessibility that's the most powerful thing. So yeah.
So do you see these daily practices and this communication network growing into a new sort of vision? Like, I see it in one way, but how does that look to you?
Yeah, I do. I see the rebuilding of community, and going back to the kind of housing cooperative, that still feels it's still very much on the kind of fringes of society. Yet more and more people, the amount of people I speak to that are like, oh, I'd love to buy some land with a group of people and set up a community, and this is becoming a real way of thinking. People are opening up to possibility of community, to possibility of sharing, and really seeing the benefits of that after being in very insular places a lot of the time, and not sharing their experiences, maybe not sharing their dreams, maybe not sharing their songs, maybe not sharing their experiences of life or of meditation or of connection to a tree, and I think that is growing, and I think that will continue to grow. And that grows within within the scientific community as well as it does outside of it. It's not removed from that, and especially when we're talking about expanded states of consciousness or spirituality or unity or oneness. These kind of experiences they demand the fact that we bring community, that we've got a grassroots structures in place for people, that we begin to build this and speak about these experiences and share them. And I think there's so much strength in our and resilience building within all of that. If our community grows, then we feel more supported. If we feel more supported, then mental health issues are hopefully going to begin to drop. Yeah. And we can see more positive mental health out there.
From the outset, from the young age, more positive mental health, more resilience.
Yeah. And we're much more aware now, with the young people that I've worked with over the last several years, there's so much more awareness of their own mental health, how they can look after themselves, that they talk to their friends about these things. And this is a real shift from my generation, where those kind of things weren't acknowledged, feelings, emotions, challenges, the things kind of to be avoided more than to be connected to. And the young people of today just have a much more open mind about these things. So let alone the generations that are following them, that are babies or toddlers now, hopefully their experience of the world is going to be one where they can communicate more about their life experience, and that builds community, and it builds depth in our relationships with each other. And that lack of depth in our relationships is definitely something that contributes to mental health issues.
Yeah, and looking at these stepping stones, I'm always saying to people, when I started teaching in the mid-90s, I wasn't allowed to recommend meditation to my students in the high school or university settings. because there wasn't research behind it, the parents might get upset, this kind of thing. And look at where we are now with meditation, somatics, breath work. So we can see that these stepping stones actually make a big difference. And that there is a big shift in the collective through these initial stepping stones. You've given me so much hope talking to you today. I really deeply wanted to understand the lay of this field and the landscape of it a little more deeply. Is there any story or final word or something from your heart that really wants to be shared with us before we end today?
I think what I'm experiencing more and more is people reaching out for support with their experiences, and as this becomes more mainstream and as we can begin, everyone has this opportunity to share their stories with each other or with somebody that can deeply understand them, then there's this sense of the world beginning to change. There's a with preparation and with integration and with exploring other pathways and other choices that people might be able to access. There is this growth, there's more hope, and with that more hope there is more heart, and with that more heart there is more connection, and this continues to unfold and unfold and unfold, and I'm really feeling people accessing, and it doesn't have to, they're not accessing sharing spaces just because they've had a challenging experience. They're accessing spaces to share so that they can integrate, so that they can have that community around them, despite that being very positive or more challenging, and that fills me with a lot of hope. That fills me with a lot of hope that we can move beyond this stuckness that we've found ourselves in as human beings, and these limiting options that we have to us that may not work, and how compounding that can be on mental health issues if you keep trying things that are given to you that don't work. And for some people they don't, for many people they don't, and that's a really hard thing to work with, and I really feel that with the people that I work with in psychotherapy and breath work, that there's kind of like, there must be something else. Why isn't this working for me? We've got this innate healing wisdom as human beings to move towards growth. That is my belief. We're doing the best we can within the environment that we find ourselves, and if that environment can expand, then so can we. So it's not become this sort of rigid, limited Western medicine, that actually we can open up to a greater sense of wholeness.
Wow, Liz, it is just such a joy to share this time with you. The presence, not only the words, but the presence here in this moment. And I'm really deeply thankful to you for being here and for sharing from the depth of your walk and your practices and the depth of your heart. You have this long seeing vision like the buffalo. So thank you for bringing that today. If people would like to be in contact with you, what's the best way for them to reach out?
I have a website. I'm going to have a new website out soon as well, but it's lizlilley.com, LIZLILLEY.com, and my contact details are on there, so yeah, I can be contacted by that.
Super, and I will put in the links, the details for the Cooperative Housing Association in Brighton and Hove, as well as for the Psychedelic Integration Circles that you're a part of, so that anyone who's listening can access those too. Yeah,
thank you, and it's such an honour to be here with you as well, and to be learning from each other. You know, we come into a similar world from many different paths, and it's really great to have these connections and be bridging gaps and learning from each other. So yeah, thank you for all your wisdom and trust.
It's been a joy, Liz. And thank you everybody for joining us. If you'd like to be involved in the podcast, please do reach out, jewelofpeace.com, hannah@jewelofpeace.com. I'd love to hear from you, hear your thoughts, your stories, and have a wonderful rest of your day.